I was a stranger in a foreign land, far from the home I knew. My life was quiet, predictable, until he came. Moses, the man chosen by God. I am Zipporah. Before I met Moses, I was a daughter, a sister, a Midianite girl, learning the rhythms of life. I did not yet know that my path would intersect with a man chosen by God, nor that my courage, curiosity, and care would be tested beyond imagination. But in those hills, in the quiet and the wind and the goats, I found the earliest pieces of the woman I was becoming. But what did it mean to be a woman beside a man who would change history? To be a wife, a mother, and a foreigner in a land of destiny?
Welcome to Testament Unspoken, where we bring biblical stories to life through the eyes of those who lived them. Each episode offers a raw, first-person perspective on some of the most powerful figures in Scripture, told with emotion, honesty, and depth. Please subscribe for more stories like this.
I was born under the wide skies of Midian, a land of rolling hills, scattered oases, and endless horizons. The wind always carried the scent of dry earth and wild herbs, the kind that makes you feel alive and small all at once. My earliest memories are of my family, my father Jethro, a man of wisdom and quiet authority, whose words always seemed to linger long after he spoke. My mother, whose hands were never still, weaving, cooking, tending to the flocks, teaching me the rhythms of care and patience. And my sisters, oh, my sisters who were as wild and fearless as the desert itself, running barefoot across the hills, chasing goats and laughter alike. I learned early that life in Midian is both fragile and beautiful. A goat could escape and disappear in a heartbeat. A sudden sandstorm could change a calm day into chaos. We worked hard from dawn, tending flocks, collecting water, preparing meals, keeping the home together in ways that mattered, but never drew attention. My father often reminded us that God watches even the smallest deeds, that faith is lived in the quiet acts of service and love, Deuteronomy 6:7. And I tried to live that way. I loved the hills. I loved the way the sun rose, casting long shadows over the valleys, how the air smelled of dew in the morning. I would sit on the rocks and watch the wind sweep over the landscape, thinking, dreaming, though I didn't know what I wanted. Sometimes I imagined walking to the distant mountains, touching lands I had only heard of in travelers' stories, tasting life beyond Midian. But life was also not always easy. Sometimes the nights were so dark and cold that my teeth would chatter under our simple blankets. The goats could fall ill, and the work was never-ending. We were a small family in a vast land, and I learned early that nothing is guaranteed. One wrong step in the wilderness, one misjudged turn, and life could change forever. And perhaps that was why I learned to notice things others overlooked. The quiet patterns of survival, the subtle signs of the weather, the moods of the animals, the silences between people that speak louder than words. I remember learning the language of prayer long before I understood the weight of destiny. My mother taught me to whisper to God in the early morning, when the world was still, asking for protection, guidance, strength. I did not yet know the trials ahead, but I knew I needed to prepare my heart. Even then, I sensed that life demanded courage, not just for myself, but for those I loved. Psalm 121, 1-2. I was curious about everything: the stars above, the shifting sands, the travelers who came to our hills with stories from distant lands. I remember asking questions I was not supposed to ask. Why do people suffer? Why do the strong prosper while the meek struggle? Why does God allow hardship? My father would answer patiently, reminding me that his ways are not always ours to understand, Isaiah 55, 8-9. But still, the questions lingered. And in my heart, I knew that one day I would need to find the courage to act, even without answers. There was a quiet restlessness in me. I loved Midian, I truly did, but I also felt limited. I would watch my sisters marry, settle, take up roles I knew I would follow someday. Yet part of me longed for more, not wealth, not fame, not glory, but a sense of purpose beyond the hills. I wondered, could a woman make a mark on the world if she stayed quietly at home? Could bravery exist without action? Could faith survive without trials? I spent long days with the flocks, the goats following me like shadows. I would hum soft tunes, sing to the animals, make up stories for myself. I often thought of the past, my ancestors, the tales of those who walked in faith long before me, those who trusted God in ways that seemed impossible. I held on to those stories. They gave me comfort, and they gave me courage I didn't yet understand. I also had my moments of pride and defiance. I wasn't timid. When older children teased me, I could argue back, run faster, climb higher, or speak my mind. My mother often shook her head and smiled. "Your heart is strong," she said, "but your words must sometimes wait, or they will carry you where your feet cannot follow." And she was right. I learned that life requires patience, that strength is as much about restraint as it is about action. Evenings were my favourite. The sun would dip behind the hills, painting the sky with fire and gold, and I would sit with my family, sharing stories, reflecting on the day. I would trace shapes in the sand with my fingers, imagining roads and rivers I might never walk. I imagined what it would be like to see the world beyond our land, to witness mountains, rivers, deserts I had only dreamed of. These moments made me feel small, but also connected, to God, to my family, to something larger than myself. Yet, there was always a quiet question in my mind. Could I ever be ready for the unknown? Could a woman born in Midian survive the storms of life that had not yet come? I didn't know. I only knew that my heart was alive, that I could hope, dream, and care. And perhaps that was the beginning of preparation for what was to come. No one tells you what it's like to stand beside a man chosen by God, to face danger, fear, and decisions you don't fully understand. I was a stranger in a land that wasn't mine, surrounded by people whose language, customs, and gods I barely understood. My life was quiet, predictable, until he came. Moses, the man chosen by God, and suddenly everything changed. I grew up among the hills of Midian, surrounded by family and the simple rhythm of life. My father, Jethro, taught me wisdom, my mother, kindness. I knew what it meant to work hard, to care for those around me, to find joy in ordinary days. And then Moses arrived, a stranger, weary, with a story of God burning in his eyes. I didn't know then how profoundly our lives would intertwine. When I first saw Moses, he was tired, worn from travel. Yet there was a fire in him, a purpose I couldn't yet grasp. I offered him water, and perhaps more than refreshment, I gave him understanding. And in that simple act, our paths were sealed. I didn't know the weight he carried, but I saw the man he was, and I knew he would carry something far greater than himself. I didn't ask to be part of a story that stretched across nations. I didn't know what it meant to marry a man who carried the weight of an entire people on his shoulders. I was his wife, yes, but also a foreigner, a mother, and a witness to destiny I couldn't yet grasp. I saw fear in his eyes, the kind that no ordinary man could carry alone. I saw the burden of calling, one I could not share, yet one I could not turn away from. And I wondered, could I survive beside him? Could I protect my children while walking through a path I didn't choose? No one tells you what it's like to stand beside a man chosen by God. No one tells you about the quiet terror of watching events unfold that you don't fully understand. The decisions, the danger, the fear, and yet the hope. Hope that somehow, by being beside him, I might find my place in a story far greater than myself. I came from Midian, a place of open skies and freedom, and here I was, in Egypt, a land of stone, gold, and strangers. Their customs, their gods, their endless expectations. I didn't belong. I learned to smile politely, to hide the ache of missing home, but the loneliness never left. Even among people, I felt unseen. And then Moses appeared, carrying secrets, purpose, and a destiny I could not yet understand. Could I follow him into a story that demanded more than I could give? Could a woman from Midian survive in the shadow of a man chosen by God? When I first saw him, I didn't know he would become my husband, or the man who would change history. He was different, humble yet filled with a quiet strength, a burden in his eyes I couldn't explain. We spoke, and I sensed his heart. The same heart that would face Pharaoh, lead a nation, and confront God's plan. It also needed a companion. Could I be that companion? Could I love him and survive the journey that awaited us? Direct Bible reference, Exodus 2:21. Moses agreed to stay with the man, and he gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. My home became Moses's home, yet it never felt entirely mine. The weight of his calling was heavy, even in ordinary days. Egypt was overwhelming, grand and cruel all at once. I watched as Moses confronted Pharaoh, as plagues swept the land. I was terrified, not just for myself, but for the people who cried out in silence. And yet, in the midst of fear, I saw Moses' devotion, his unwavering trust in God. And I learned that sometimes faith demands action, even when you cannot see the end. Optional Bible verse, reference, Exodus 2:21 through 22. Moses agreed to stay with the man, and he gave Zipporah his daughter. She bore him a son and named him Gershom, for he said, "I have been an alien residing in a foreign land." I watched him wrestle with decisions I couldn't understand. I feared for him, for our children, for myself. But I also felt a pride I could barely name. He was chosen, and I was part of that story. Could love survive the burden of destiny? Could a marriage hold under the pressure of God's plans? The air was thick with fear, yet alive with purpose. Moses spoke of God's commands, plagues, and freedom, and I watched, my heart racing. I didn't fully understand what was happening, but I understood the stakes. We were leaving, and the path ahead was uncertain. My children in my arms, my husband at my side. I had to trust, even when trust felt impossible. I realized then that being chosen by God wasn't just about him. It was about all of us, and I had to find strength I never knew I had. The wilderness tested us in ways I couldn't have imagined. The sun scorched our backs, the nights were cold, and the people were restless, complaining, doubting. I held my children close, whispering prayers I barely understood myself, and I watched Moses carry the burden of an entire nation, wondering, how does one man bear so much and remain faithful? I learned then that faith is not passive. It's the strength to keep walking when the road is unknown, when danger is near, and when the world doubts you. There was a moment I can never forget, the night I acted to save my husband's life. God's command came through danger, and I could not falter. I took my son, I did what was necessary, and I realized, sometimes courage is quiet, unseen by the world. But without it, destiny cannot unfold. Direct Bible reference, Exodus 4:24-26. At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met Moses and was about to kill him. But Zipporah took a flint knife, cut off her son's foreskin, and touched Moses' feet with it. It happened so fast I could barely comprehend it. God's anger burned against Moses, and I knew I had to act. With trembling hands, I performed what needed to be done, saving him, saving all of us. In that moment, I understood. God's plans demand more than obedience. They demand courage, decisiveness, and sometimes a willingness to act in ways the world cannot understand. I was just a woman, but I saved the man who would lead a nation. Direct Bible reference, Exodus 4:24-26. Zipporah circumcises her son and touches Moses' feet, saying, "Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me." I may not have spoken to Pharaoh, I may not have led armies, but my role, My role mattered. I was beside him, guiding, supporting, sometimes saving, often silent. I realized that God doesn't just use the mighty, the loud, the obvious. He uses the faithful, the steady, the courageous in quiet ways. And I was one of them. I watched him lead, every step heavy with expectation and fear. And I stayed beside him, silent, offering strength where words could not. I worried for our family, for the people, for the man I loved. Yet I saw God's hand in all he did, and I knew my place was to support, to endure, to trust. My life has been one of shadows and light. Few will speak of me, but I have seen the threads of God's plan, woven through my hands. I am a mother, a wife, a stranger in foreign lands. Yet my choices mattered. And sometimes the smallest acts of courage shape history more than we realize. My story is not written in battles or miracles. It is written in the quiet courage of standing beside a man chosen by God. My son Gershom grew, carrying both our names and the story of our journey. Moses fulfilled the path God set, and I played my part, unseen but necessary. The strength of a family, the courage of a woman, these are the quiet miracles that God uses to change the world. I trusted him with my life, my children, and my husband. And in that trust, I found my place in a story far greater than myself. I am Zipporah, a wife, a mother, a Midianite stranger who learned that faith is not only in the grand moments, but in the choices we make when no one is watching. I have walked through fear, uncertainty, and courage. I have been a stranger, a helper, a protector. And through it all, I have learned that even the unseen hands of God's plan have power. Now I look back. I remember the sweat, the tears, the quiet moments no one wrote about. I see Gershom grown, carrying stories we lived. I see Moses, his hands scarred by leadership, yet still reaching for God. And I was there, not just beside him, but as part of the invisible hand shaping history. Exodus 18:10-11. I have learned that courage is messy, faith is frightening, and love is relentless. The story isn't always in the grand gestures. Sometimes it's in holding a child through a long night, in acting when no one watches, in choosing to trust when every instinct screams not to, James 1:2-4. I am Zipporah. I am a mother, a wife, a stranger who found her place. My story isn't famous, but it is mine. And maybe, just maybe, that is enough. I trusted, I acted, and I surrendered. And in that surrender, I found my purpose.
If you found meaning in these stories, don't forget to share them with others and subscribe to the channel. Your support is highly appreciated. Thank you. Hit the notification button.